Hi. So this little video is kind of an overview of hearing loss. So I want to tell you that your student who has hearing loss, it's not really cut and dry. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. So when you have hearing loss, it's not just a matter of having a dampened sound, like everything is quieter. Sometimes that is the case, but more than likely it's not. There's often distortion involved, and some frequencies might be louder and some might be softer. And at any rate, it's quite challenging to operate in a hearing world when you are missing a lot of what's going on. There are often different degrees of hearing loss in each ear. So the hearing loss that is experienced in the right ear is different than is experienced in the left ear. Sometimes it's a unilateral loss, and so there's typical hearing in one ear and then there's hearing loss in the other. And all of these things serve to make it difficult to follow what's going on. Kids who have hearing loss have a hard time overhearing conversations. So when you think about all of the learning that happens in your classroom that isn't just direct you to the teacher. What about kids when they're talking amongst themselves or working in small groups, or they overhear conversations that adults are having in their home life or in the hallway? A lot of that is being missed. So a lot of that incidental learning is being missed. And they often also have difficulty localizing, which is being able to tell where a sound is coming from. So if you can't tell where a sound is coming from, it's hard to know where to really focus your hearing. Other things. Here's a tricky thing. They appear to hear a lot more than they do. But there are a lot of visual cues that go along with communication and information as well. Things that you and I pick up on maybe or might be aware of, but which they are all over because they're using visual cues as the main support of their language and their content learning. So another thing that comes out of that is, therefore, they only hear what they hear, and they don't hear what they don't hear. So if you say to your student, "Oh, are you hearing this okay? Did you hear that?" More than likely, they're going to say yes, because that's what they heard. They're not saying yes to the things that they didn't hear because they didn't hear them. So it can get a little tricky. It's good to listen to your students, but it's also good to engage other cues that you have and look for more subtle things to make sure that they are hearing and understanding what's going on in the environment around them. They're often hypersensitive to what they do hear. So if they have a lot of hearing loss, but then they hear something and then they complain that it's too loud, well, that's kind of speaks to the distortion piece again. And that's a really complicated subject. So just know that it really does make sense. If a student doesn't appear to hear things and then appears that things are too loud, it actually does make sense, even though it might not make sense from an outsider perspective or a superficial view. What else? So there are a lot, it's a complex subject, but I just wanted to give you some general things. One of the, a couple tips is that it's visual cues. I can't overstate how important it is to have different visual cues. And that is facial expressions, body language, pictures, not pictures because your student can't read well enough, but pictures to illustrate what's going on, to show a flow of events, to show a flow of knowledge, to put kind of markers in where they can kind of chunk information because there's an image or an action or something that happens to set aside one chunk of information from another. So whether that's, if you're comparing, and here's an example, if you're comparing and contrasting, so you could lean more to one side when you're talking about one thing and lean more to the other when you're talking about the other. And that kind of sets up a reference point for what you're talking about now and what you're talking about at a different time. So there are lots of subtle kinds of things like that you will just, if you think about it, you'll just find yourself naturally doing. I'm not asking that you overhaul your teaching, just being more conscious about the things that you do and why you do them and what kind of visual information you are giving out along with your auditory information. You want to minimize the background noise in your classroom and maximize the ability to hear what is there. And I will do a separate video about that. But all of this is to say then, what do you have as an intervention? Well, we have this thing called hearing assistive technology, which is HAT, and replacing what has been known in the past as an FM system, because we've moved beyond FM at this point. So that's what I will talk to you about next.